I will try to not speak too loudly. I'm used to projecting and not being mic'd. So if I yell at you, I don't mean to yell at you. This is really a weird experience, being mic'd. All right, so obviously we're here to talk about wildcats. Wildcats are my favorite thing. So I really enjoy presenting about them and talking about them endlessly, as my partner in crime over there, Cheyenne, who is the coordinator for the program, will attest. I can go on and on about them. I love all animals, almost all animals, I should say, but I really love cats. So this is my favorite subject. Now, just a little bit of a warning, there are a couple of photos in here that some people will find displeasurable, including me. You know, dead cats. Nobody really likes that, but we get important scientific data sometimes from these, or at least sometimes people that are doing this illegally are prosecuted, which we can at least hearten in that. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. A good majority of the photographs, I always like to give credit where credit is due, are from my predecessor in this program, the guy who started this program, Randy Babb, best naturalist and wildlife biologist I've ever met in my life. And he took a lot of these photos, including this photo that we see here of Panthera onca, the jaguar, which we'll talk more about. So I always like to cover a little bit of evolutionary history or natural history of any of the topics that we cover. First of all, it's my background. Quaternary Sciences is studying the Pleistocene, or the ice ages. And I like to give kind of the deeper sense of history, right, as we cover this. So the family history of cats has always been murky, as it is with many carnivore species. And recent studies using DNA have kind of shed more evidence on that. And all these animals, all cats, can trace their ancestors back to this Panthera-like animal that we'll talk about, and I'll show you some artist renderings of today. And what ended up happening is, as global sea levels rose and fell, right, because use static sea level, just means global sea level, cats were able to migrate in and out of different areas. And almost all wildcats today, there are very few exceptions, we'll talk about one of them tonight, but almost all wildcats are threatened or endangered with extinction. They're all on the decline, almost all on the decline. And just a little bit about why the history is murky. It's largely to do with how fossils form. So for a fossil to form effectively, a dead animal, or a dead human, as that case may be, has to be buried quickly. Otherwise, it's going to get eaten by scavengers, carnivores. Scavengers is going to get trampled. The bones are going to get scattered. It's not going to preserve well. So it has to get buried quickly, preferably in anoxic conditions, meaning lack of oxygen. And if you take a look at the food pyramid in any situation, primary producers are at the base and apex predators are at the top, meaning that there's fewer of them just by nature, right? I mean, there's fewer predators than there are prey. There has to be. So predators and predator history, fossil history, is always a fairly rare thing because there's few of them and they need those special conditions to get preserved as fossils. Those two things combined, and you got a pretty rare circumstance. So some of those things that we'll talk about today. So all of them trace their ancestry back to Proailurus. Proailurus was basically the size of a modern house cat, a large house cat, but a modern house cat. Yeah, you'll see pictures. There may or may not be a slipped-in photo of one of my 9 cats that I live with. Here, all indoor cats. And saber-toothed cats, another thing, one of my favorite things in the world, dominated the world during this period of time for millions of years, usually during the Pleistocene, so let's say past 5 million years or so. And they were outlived by less assuming animals, right? Even the lion and tiger today, mountain lion that we have here in Arizona, or African lion that we have today, don't have those huge maxillary or upper canines that the big cats, that the saber cats did. So these unassuming cats like Pseudolurus that we'll talk about were their progeny. And if we take a look at them, I'm not going to get into a lot of detail with some of these slides, but if we take a look at this, so Proailurus, Pseudolurus, And basically from here up are the only extant. Extant is just the opposite of extinct. The only extant cats in the world. Everything from here down have gone extinct. We did have, by the way, that trip in Africa where I kind of changed my focus from early hominid stuff to mammalian carnivore stuff. That's what I was hoping to find was Meganterian because it was contemporaneous with the hominid fossils that we were digging at the time. But we did have, Macaridus, Homotherium, and Smilodon here in Arizona, which is pretty cool. So this is obviously not a photograph, but an artist's rendering of Proelerus, that small house cat-sized animal that lived between 20 and 30 million years ago. And that animal spent a lot of its time in the trees. We can tell this by its anatomy, is how you can tell these kind of things. Obviously, there was nobody there taking photos 20 or 30 million years ago, so that's how we can tell is by looking at the anatomy of this animal. And Pseudolurus, again, artist rendering, kind of rendering it with spots. The elements that you see in kind of this brown color are fossil elements that are in the record. In other words, that's the parts of the fossils that we've recovered. The rest is reconstructed based upon those. Thankfully, the mandible, the forelimb, the pelvis, these things are very informative when you're looking at the fossil record. So carnivore success has been, it's a storied history. Smilodon is the saber-toothed cat, or you often hear it called the saber-toothed tiger here in like Rancho La Brea and tar pits, right? There was a ton of these things there. And Thylacolesmilis was a similar animal, but they're absolutely not related. This is a eutherian mammal, just like us, gave birth to live young, produced milk, all the mammals things, right? This is a mammal, but it's a metathere. So this is a marsupial. It had a pouch. But it also developed these large canines, these maxillary canines. Maxillary is just upper, mandibular is lower. And it developed those just like this. And that was a special adaptation to hunting large-bodied prey, larger-bodied prey than normal cats of that size would hunt. And they used those teeth in various ways, depends on who you listen to. If you listen to Bill Ackerston or the guy out of Kansas, Larry Marten, whoever's theory you listen to. But in my opinion, they were used for procuring that prey, bringing it down, versus dispatching it, killing it. We know they were very sensitive, and you can see the mandibular modification here for Thylacolesmilis was very different. But in the animal kingdom, we often see, and we'll see this again tonight, generalists and specialists. When things change, generalists tend to do very well. Specialists tend to not do very well. The classic example of this is like the koala bear. They eat what? Eucalyptus. Well, what if there's a eucalyptus blight like there was on chestnuts in North America here? Not so good for them if they only eat eucalyptus, right? Generalists can adapt. They can change. They can go to a different thing to focus on. Well, these were specialists, and when those large-bodied game in the Pleistocene went extinct, so did they. They went along with them because their prey was no longer there. This animal is not built for chasing down rabbits and making a living that way. First of all, very short tail, meaning that it's not particularly, it's a stalk and ambush predator. We could get into the details, but I don't want to waste all that time. So we did have Smilodon here. By the way, this is Mauricio Anton, does great paleo art if you're into that kind of thing, has several books published. But the type specimen of this is California, Smilodon californicus. This makes sense. Large-bodied prey, stalk and ambush predator, as we talked about, possibly gregarious, and so meaning that they kind of lived in groups like modern lions. Think of African lions, live in groups, right? And the reason that we say that is because when you go to the tar pits, there was a lot of these. So for every one mammoth or sloth, giant sloth, that was in the tar pits, you had many of these. So what the presumption is right? Because nobody was there. But what the presumption is that a mammoth got stuck. Mammoths are big, strong animals, take a long time to die. They make a lot of noise. These things are predators. They hear that struggle, they come along, and like Velcro, they were jumping onto it, and then they got stuck themselves. And that's largely the evidence that we have that these things were gregarious. No sexual dimorphism between them. So sexual dimorphism just means difference between male and female in some way. Usually it refers to size. Humans have sexual dimorphism. We have relatively weak sexual dimorphism, maybe 10, 15%. Men are typically 10, 15% larger than females. But a big example would be African lions or gorillas, right? The males are twice the size of the females. That's strong sexual dimorphism, or SSD. And this went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, just the ice ages. So 10,000 years ago, give or take, depending on your location. We also had something very interesting here. We had Miracinonyx trumani. Miracinonyx, so the modern cheetah is Acinonyx. The Miracinonyx trumani was the American cheetah, genetically actually not related to the African cheetah. It developed independently here, evolutionarily. This is one of the reasons why our modern pronghorn are so fast, is because at some point in time during their evolutionary history, they were avoiding that. And we know there's nothing on this continent that can catch a healthy adult pronghorn except by surprise, but nothing can outrun one today, and that was because there used to be cheetahs here. There is a competing theory, just to be open. A professor from NAU has a theory that dogs, certain canids like direwolves, were the reason why these antelope are so fast, or pronghorn are so fast technically. But it's not a well-accepted theory. It's mostly due to the Miracinonyx trumani. This is Stachyceros, by the way. You can see the difference in the horns. They kind of have these V-shaped horns, but that is the ancestor of the modern pronghorn. So Proelerus is lower jaw. We saw that in that one picture with the brown bones. So this is a fossil, a subfossil really, of Pseudolurus. And we're going to talk a little bit more about cat teeth in a moment. But notice there's very few in there. Very few teeth. We'll talk about what's called dental reduction, not reduction in size, reduction in number of teeth, and why that's important. So if we take a quick look at this terrible photograph that I have here, or picture that I have here, Proelerus, Pseudolurus, and a modern cat. Notice the trend is for that dental reduction. More, and again, just number of teeth. More teeth, fewest teeth there. And that is because these animals went from more generalist to more specific, hypercarnivory, or obligate carnivores. They don't need teeth for grinding. They only need teeth for getting food, cutting it quickly, getting it down their gullet before another predator comes along. And we'll talk more about that when we compare them to canid teeth, which is pretty interesting. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. The modern cat family tree, 37 species of cat. Memorize those because you'll be tested at the end. The way that these work, just to let you know, so this is millions of years ago, so further left, deeper in time, modern time, and where things branch, that's where they diverged, right? That's where those animals diverged. That's their last common ancestor. That's the way to look at these. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here. Panthera diverged. Panthera are the big cats, the cats that can roar. We only have one here in Arizona. And that diverged about 6.4 million years ago. And all of these ancestors go to modern cats, including domestic cats, which diverge about 3.4 million years ago. So I promised a felid and a canid comparison. Notice very few teeth, many more teeth, and that's because dogs are much more, they're carnivores, but they're much more omnivorous than are cats. Cats don't eat vegetables. They don't eat fruit. They don't eat any of that stuff. They don't even, when they're eating an animal, they even squeeze the poop out of the intestines of that animal because they don't want the grass and stuff that's in there. They literally squeeze it out of the intestines. Then they'll eat the intestines. It's sausage casing. But dogs have a different arsenal of teeth because they are much more omnivorous and they have many more teeth for that purpose. So in a cat, you have 2 premolars and 1 molar. That's it in the back of the mandible. In dogs, you have many more premolars, you have many more molars, including these flat parts of the M1, M2, M3, the flat parts for grinding up vegetable matter, bone, things like that. Cats don't have that. This is part of the reason, by the way, why your cats, if you have domestic cats and if you feed them dry food, why they make a mess when they eat dry food. If you notice, when they eat it, they usually turn their hand and kind of do this, and that's because they have teeth that aren't really made for dry food. Not that dry food's bad for them, it actually helps keep their teeth clean and stuff, but that's why they kind of scatter bits all around. So the family lineage of cats have been split into 3 genera. Genera is just a word that means is the plural of genus, right? So for us, we have a genus. Everything, scientists love to categorize things. And everything has a binomial, a 2-part name, a scientific name. We're Homo sapiens. Homo is our genus, sapiens is our species. So the genera is the plural of that, and the 3 are Panthera, cats that can roar, Acinonyx, cheetah, it's the only member in that family today, and Felis, all other small cats. And I put small in there because the mountain lion is in Felis. And because it doesn't have a hyoid bone, it can't roar. But it's still categorized as Felis, and we all know mountain lions are not particularly small cats. So, characteristics of felids in Arizona. We're getting there. We're almost getting to the Arizona stuff. So, carnivorous, retractable claws. They all have retractable claws. The modern cheetah is the only cat that doesn't have fully retractable claws. It only has partially retractable claws. And the reason is, think cleats, sport cleats. It's because of how it catches its prey. It needs those for the added grip when it runs after prey. Acinonyx trumani, the one that we saw before that did live in America, or North America, that animal had even less retractable claws. They were almost dog-like in that sense. So what that means, it's up to you. Enlarged carnassials and enlarged auditory bullae. So I know that might not mean a lot to you, so I will show you what I'm talking about. So this is a bobcat skull, and carnassials are a pair of teeth. All carnivores, mammalian carnivores, have them, and they are P4 and M1, 4th premolar, 1st molar. And when those teeth come together, they create a shear effect. They are like a pair of shears, and the whole purpose, again, to cut meat quickly, get it down the gullet, before competition comes so they can move on their way. So they all have those pairing teeth, including dogs, cats, hyenas, wolverines, whatever. Anything that's a mammalian carnivore has carnassial paired teeth. And the auditory bullae, so now you're looking at the bottom of the skull, right? Should have brought an actual skull. These are the bullae, the auditory bullae. Single is bulla. What those are is where the ear bones are housed. So we have 3 small ear bones, the incus, malleus, and stapes. Those 3 bones are housed inside of those puffy bones called bullae. The more expanded those bullae are when you look at a skull, generally speaking, that means that animal has a better sense of hearing, or it relies more on its sense of hearing. And cats have them because hearing is very important to cats. And here we can see them a little closer together, the premolar and the molar coming together. This one goes on the inside, that flat surface goes on the inside of this one, and that kind of cusp goes in between these 2 cusps, creates a perfect shear, cutting meat very quickly. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here, but when we look at claws, the retractable claws, the extended claws, for a cat to extend its claws, it needs to flex muscles. The relaxed condition is for those to be inside their sheaths. And they're inside sheaths to keep them sharp. They keep them sharp because unlike dogs or cheetahs, which largely use those claws for grip as they're running after prey, most cats use them to grab prey or to climb trees. So they need to keep them sharp. If they got dull, like dogs' claws or cheetahs' claws, they wouldn't do them anywhere near as much good. So to keep them sharp, they keep them retracted in these kind of fleshy sheaths. So this is something that comes up a lot, and it has to do with the footprints or tracks of cats versus dogs. I can't tell you the number of times that Cheyenne and I get emails, somebody took a picture, they were out hiking, they saw a footprint, right? You're much more likely to see a footprint or scat, poop, of an animal than you are to see the animal itself, right? Just makes sense because that stuff stays around, the animal doesn't stick around. So people send in footprint photos all the time, and they're like, is this a lion? Is this a bobcat? Is this? Most of the time it's a domestic dog. Somebody was hiking with their dog. So I'll tell you the quick way to tell the difference. And the quick way is dog prints are long and narrow. Cat prints are wide and short. That's first. The sure telltale way is what I call the X. Dog prints, you can draw an X through the negative space. In between those toes and past the plantar pad, the heel pad, you can make an X. In the dirt, that's really evident. When you see that X, if you see an X, it's a dog of some sort. Might be a coyote, might be a wolf, depending on where you are. It might be somebody hiking with their domestic dog. Cats, you cannot do that. If you go in between the last toes, you run into the plantar pad, and that's because the plantar pad is much wider on cats than on dogs. And then there's a couple of things. One is not surefire. If you see claw marks, likely a dog, not necessarily. Cats, again, remember, they keep their claws kind of inside most of the time. But if it slips, if it's muddy out, if it's running, the claws might be out. So that's not a surefire way. The X is a surefire way. And the lobes on the plantar pad. Dogs have 2 lobes, cats have 3 lobes. But in reality, it's very hard to see. And I'll show you an actual photograph in a moment. The last thing I want to point out is front feet, toes point in. So that's a front left. Back feet, toes point straight in cats. Then the other difference is basically just size. So this is what an actual lion print looks like in the wild. And you see, it's not as clear when it's in the wild. But if we draw a line, so what we can see, no claws. We can see it's definitely wider than it is long. This knife here, folded knife, is about 4 1/4 inches, means that this paw here is about 3 3/4 inches wide. That makes it lion territory. It's not bobcat. I took this photo, it's about 200 feet from my front door in Phoenix. I live adjacent to state land, so there's state land right there, and the Tonto is a couple miles away. You can't see clearly, but there are 3 lobes back here on the plantar pads. No claws, like I said. Toes are all pointing the same direction, so that is the back foot, of my opinion, of a young female. Oh, look, a bunch of arrows pointing to all the things I just talked about. Okay, so all wildcats make their living by not being seen. They're all masters of stealth. Jaguar are not quite as good at it as the other cats. They're not as quiet, and they don't have to be. They're the toughest guy on the block, generally speaking, where they live, so they don't generally have to be as quiet as other cats. And they don't cover their prey at their kills, like every other cat in North America does. All right, so we have home here in Arizona to 4 cats. Don't worry, I'll get to Jaguarundi at the end. Mountain lions, Puma concolor, has more names than any other cat in the world. A few of them: catamount, cougar, panther, puma, ghost cat, all kinds of names in that for that animal. Jaguar has names like tiger, tiger cat, Mexican tiger, leopard, tigre, Panthera onca is the binomial for that. Bobcat, Lynx rufus, also known as a wildcat or a lynx cat. Don't confuse this with the Canadian lynx. They are different animals. That's Lynx canadensis. Lynx rufus is the bobcat. We don't have the Canadian lynx here in Arizona, at least not currently. During the ice ages, we did. And lastly, the ocelot, this cute little devil here, the Leopardus pardalis, tigerio, or leopard cat, very mild-mannered cat. And this photo is showing relative size: domestic cat, ocelot, bobcat, jaguar, and lion. Lion is longer than the jaguar, but the jaguar is more sturdily built. It's more heavy-bodied than is the lion. And this domestic cat, I don't know whose domestic cat that is, but it's not my Mulder. I'm just saying. So that guy right there is about 24.5 pounds. He is on a diet, but he's next to a normal-sized cat there. Yeah, I don't know whose domestic cat that was, but it wasn't mine. All right, so let's talk about bobcats. Lynx rufus. Most common of all wildcats in Arizona, like not even close. Easily the most common. It's distinguished by having the spotted coats. Its ears often have a tuft of fur at the tip. This one does not. Ornate facial markings. They really have really pretty faces, and they can be very ornate in their markings. Obviously the short tail, the bobcat, right, where that comes from, and relatively small size. In Arizona, the average weight of a bobcat is 12 to 17 pounds. That's it. The largest bobcat ever recorded, to my knowledge, and this was just last year, largest bobcat ever recorded in the state of Arizona was, what's it called? The Bobcats of Tucson project, which is a project where they're capturing and collaring bobcats, and so they can track them, so they know where they're going, so they can keep track of that, and know where to put in crossings and things like that to actually help preserve the population. One of those, which was captured, collared, released, weighed 25.2 pounds. It's the largest bobcat ever taken. Now, northern part of the range, you go up to Minnesota and get a bobcat, or Wyoming or Montana, and bobcats will easily get 35, 38, even 40 pounds. Cold, it's something called Bergman's rule, which I'm not going to get into tonight, but cold weather and mammals means larger body size, because larger body mass means more mass relative to surface area means it can maintain its body heat better. Think of small animals, hummingbirds, right, which aren't mammals, but think of hummingbirds, they have to feed constantly. Shrews, moles, they have to constantly eat because they're very small, they have large surface area relative to their mass, therefore they shed heat very quickly. So we talked a little bit about generalists versus specialists. And these two, this is what success looks like. The bobcat, is pretty much the only cat in the New World that is expanding both its numbers and its range. Every other cat is the opposite. Coyotes are the master of this. There is nothing better than a coyote for being a generalist. They live anywhere, they can make a living on anything, they can eat anything, anywhere they are, they can get groceries. They are the consummate generalist, and they also are expanding their number and their range. So this is the range of bobcats. Everywhere that you see that's blue or purple or lavender or lilac or whatever you want to call that, but pretty much everywhere in the state of Arizona. That won't be the case with other cats. So habitat generalist, which is why it does so well. They like rocky, broken habitat that has lots of shrub and cover for them to be able to hunt from. They become sexually mature at 2 years of age. Breeding can happen any time of year here in Arizona. It's not always the case, but in Arizona it is. And the average litter size for bobs is 3 kittens. Generally speaking, if it's felis, it's kittens. So even a mountain lion, typically, you could be correct by calling them kittens versus cubs. Panthera, cubs. So they are very efficient predators, very good at getting small animals. Jackrabbits, cottontails make up 45, 47% of their daily diet. They also eat things like quail, gopher, lagomorphs, which is rabbits, hares. Make up the majority of their diet. Other rodents, wood rats, porcupines, basically if they can kill it, they'll eat it. They do occasionally get found with things like deer in their stomach. Most likely that's carrion or a fawn. If they're lucky enough to come across a fawn, they can kill a fawn. They can't take an adult deer. Deer remains have been found, like I said, but most likely that's opportunity. Carrion is just dead animals. And again, they can take young fawn if they come across it. So moving on to mountain lions. Mountain lions, like many other cats, have held a special place in human history. This is a petroglyph from PIFO, from Petrified Forest. The Native American populations had great respect for lions because they are phenomenal animals and deserving of that respect. Note, it used to be Felis concolor. It is now Puma concolor. So they have a different genus, but they're still in that Felis group because they can't roar. So, second largest cat in all of the Americas. They can be 7 feet in length. They are obligate carnivores, like all cats. They can have 1 to 6 kittens. It depends on how good the groceries are that year. and the water. So water means better groceries. And they need lots of room to live. The home range for these things can be, 150 square miles plus for a male, anyway. So really big, they need room to live. Population in Arizona is considered to be stable or slightly increasing. Got to be honest, it's been more than a decade since a census, has been taken. So since a full survey has been taken to get a true estimate of how many lions are in the state. Some say as low as 1,500, some say up 3,000. I think 3,000 is optimistic, so I go with the 2,000 number from biologists that have done more recent work on these animals. So they are characterized by long, thick tails. That's because they're extraordinarily athletic. They chase their prey, and that tail is a rudder. It's used for balance and speed. They have rounded ears, which we can see here. They have a relatively small head for their body size, as opposed to like a jaguar. Jaguar have a very big head for their body size, very broad head, and we'll talk about that. And absence of spotting, other than, it doesn't have a body pattern. It doesn't, like a bobcat or a jaguar or an ocelot, it doesn't have an obvious body pattern when adult, which I'll show you photos. It does have subtle facial markings. It has the white lips and the black cheeks there. And again, no hyoid bone. Hyoid bone is, we have them. It's what enables us to speak, is having a hyoid bone. If cats have them, they can roar. If they don't, they can't. If you've ever heard lions, mountain lions, they do not roar. They make a bunch of squeaks, chirps. They make a bunch of sounds. They can make a very loud and aggressive, scary sounding hiss, but they can't roar. So they live pretty much everywhere in the state except the northeast corner. They don't live in the northeast corner of the state just because it doesn't make good hunting ground for them. There's not enough cover, there's not enough prey. They tend to not live there, but they live pretty much everywhere else. The kittens are spotted at birth, and they maintain those spots for up to about 2 years. And after that period of time, they stay with mom. Lion moms are excellent moms. Dads, not so much. But lion moms are excellent moms. And they stay with their mom learning how to lion, because there's a lot to know, for up to 2 years, 18 to 24 months typically, or 22 months, before they strike out. And here we can see juvenile lions. So if you saw that quickly, you might think it's an adult. But if you look closely, you can still see it has some spots on it. And that is because this is an animal that is less than 2 years old. Here's a better photo that I stole from this photographer, David Niles. This is mom, and these are her kits. And these kittens here, I don't know that I'd call them kittens anymore, but they still have their spots. They're still with mom learning how to lion. They are very effective predators, very efficient, and they are capable of taking down animals much larger than themselves. You can see the muscles under this animal. You always hear silly people saying, "Oh, I could take a lion." Don't try that. They're very strong animals. In Arizona, they're pretty small comparatively. Average size for a mountain lion in the state of Arizona is probably 75 to 145 pounds. They get over 200 in the northern parts of the range and the extreme southern parts of the range. Very wide-ranging animal, goes all the way down to southern Argentina. Deer make up about 50% of a mountain lion's diet, and prey is typically covered with sticks and debris to hide it. You can see this one's collared. You wonder how they get these photos. Well, this one's collared. They knew where its prey was, so they went and set up a camera trap. But this one, they cover it with dirt and debris, and they do that to stop other carnivores from seeing it, and from things like turkey vultures from seeing it, and condors. Very, very good eyes, although turkey vultures also have good nose. Condors, not so much. But they sometimes follow turkey vultures because of their sense of smell. But they do that to keep it safe, and they'll feed on that until it's gone. Adult male mountain lion, again, needs a home range of about 150 square miles. And Arizona, again, most of the state is suitable habitat for them. A single male will cover at least 3, 4, 5, 6 females. And he'll kind of make the rounds, going around, looking for who's receptive. And different females will be receptive at different times of the year, and if they're receptive, then he'll stick around, and then mate, and then the kittens are born, and then he goes on his way. Mom is left with the hard work. So Arizona's third largest predatory animal, behind jaguar and behind black bear. Black bear, as we know, can be predatory. They're typically not, but they can be, and they certainly have the tools to be. And just by size, they're the biggest. There's 2 known attacks in Arizona, but no deaths currently recorded. Let's hope it stays that way. They have killed people in California, Colorado, Canada, many other states. I think 3 people in California have been killed by lions. It is very, very rare. The odds of you being killed by a lion, 1 in over 1 billion. You got about 3 times the odds of winning the lottery. So, not really good odds. So, don't be freaked out, and I'll talk about, how to deal with if you do come across a lion. Good. So, yes, it's good stuff to know. He said it was a trail runner, so he was interested in knowing that. So, again, just to show you a better print that you might find in the wild, by me it was very rocky, but this was obviously made in soft dirt. You can see clearly the 3 lobes in the back, 3 lobes. The wider than long, you can't make an X through it because you hit the plantar pad, and no claws. So all of that goes to show that's what a good lion print would look like. Found, again, virtually all Arizona habitats, except for the northeast corner. So what to do if you encounter one? Do not run. Running will get the instinct of the cat to chase you. That's the last thing you want. And basically, wave your arms, shout. Don't have to scream. And the reason why I generally recommend against screaming is because most people, when they scream, their voice register goes up. You don't want a high-pitched scream. Prey items have high-pitched screams. You don't want to be associated with prey in any way, shape, or form. Not that you have to try to be James Earl Jones, not that I could do that, but just your normal voice. Go away, lion, go away. Never take your eyes off the lion, never turn your back to a lion, never turn your back to any wildcat. They want to surprise you, they want to attack from the back. In India, where people work in mangroves and things like that, where there's tigers, far fewer today, and even lions, the Gir lions that live there, very few of those. But they wear masks on the back of their head because that way it looks like somebody's looking at you. And cats like surprise attacks. So make yourself look bigger, right? And back away. It says throw objects here, but let me give you a caveat to that. When somebody tells you to throw something, and if they leave it there, what people do is this. Never do that. Never bend over around a cat. You're going from not typical prey to typical prey. And you're potentially taking your eyes off the cat. Never do that. You want to look at the cat and you want to back up slowly. And the way to do that is to use your legs. Slide, step. Slide, step. The reason you're sliding is in case there's a log or a stick across the trail, you don't want to trip and fall, right? So you're sliding to make sure that your way is clear. If you have something in your hands, you can throw that. Your cell phone would be a good thing. But, you have something on your pack that you can pull off, water bottle, something. Great. Don't bend over in front of a cat because you're just turning yourself into prey. That's literally, and I seldom hear people say that, but it's absolutely true. You don't want to become prey. And if you go to Africa, if you go on safari in Africa, I mean like photo safari, and you're going to look at animals, and you're sitting in an open, what they call lorry, right? It's a flatbed truck with chairs in it, and you're sitting in that, and the lions don't look twice at you because you're not prey. As soon as they see that, your feet on the ground. Now you have feet on the ground. Now you're a prey. But when you're in a truck, you're part of a big, noisy, smelly animal. And they're like, no, that's too big for me. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Same thing here. So this is one of the photos I was talking about. Big game animals. Hunters are able to take one per year in the state of Arizona with a permit. This photo was taken just a few weeks ago. It's a Buick. I didn't notice that before. It's kind of cool. All right, so moving on to jaguar. Another revered cat. This is an Olmec sculpture of a jaguar revered by people of North, Central, and South America. The jaguar was and is. So they can weigh up to 300 pounds or more in South America. So this is one of the cats that goes against that Bergman's rule that I talked about, where northern part of the range, or the further away you get from the equator, I should say, the bigger they get. These are the opposite. It's one of the few breakers of the rule. And the reason is groceries. Eating in Costa Rica is a lot better than eating in the Arizona desert for a jaguar. And so in Arizona, they typically weigh 145, 150 pounds. In the heat of their range, they can weigh 300, even a little bit more than that. Easily largest cat in North America, dietary generalist. They've been found with, one was found with a stomach full of frogs because they do like water. They'll eat anything they can catch, and they have a very unique way of dispatching, killing their prey, very unlike every other cat, yes. And I'll show you a very short video clip momentarily. And again, they don't bury their prey. And notice it says majority of prey items in Arizona believed to be. Scientists never like that. They never like saying believed to be. But the reason is because there's just not a whole lot of data yet on them. So they do not bury their prey because they're the biggest guys on the block. They don't have to bury their prey. So they don't. As part of not being cat-like, like I talked about. They have massive heads. They have very broad heads relative to their size. They have the most powerful bite of all cats, which is one of the reasons that they can dispatch prey in a way that other cats can't. They have spotted faces, rounded ears, like we see. They do have a hard bone, so they can roar. The range, now I'm going to show you a bunch of maps. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly because I'm not going to talk about every single point on this map. There's a great article, and I'd be happy, by the way, I have up here on the stage, just FYI, I have some stickers from my program, which is selfless, self-promotion here. But they're kind of cool. They have a pretty picture on them. And bookmarks, which has a QR code, gets you to our program, and my cards. Feel free to take a business card. I'll also put my email up at the end. Don't hesitate to email me, particularly if you have like a picture, like you want something identified. That totally is sometimes the best part of our day. Be patient with me. I might be in the field, might take me a week or two to get back to you, but if it's been a couple weeks, don't hesitate to send a reminder. There's a great article that was just done last year, 2022. I mentioned my predecessor, Randy Babb, who took most of these photos. He did an article with Dave Brown, which if you're into natural history in Arizona, ecozones, wildlife biology, Dave Brown was a legend. He just passed away a couple of years ago. And they just published an article of every known account, and they did an exhaustive research into every known account of jaguar in the state of Arizona. I believe it's 83, 87 accounts of jaguar. Unfortunately, most of those are somebody killed a jaguar. Yeah, that's where it comes from, that data. Originally, they historically went all the way up to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Modern jaguar are typically only found down in these two little areas down in southern Arizona. So if we take a look at a map, this is a map. This needs to be updated with that 2022 information. This was the original article, came out in 2014. This was done at that time. More than 82, there it is. In Arizona, in that article I was mentioning. And feel free to shoot me an email. I can even send you the article if you don't have access to it. This is just showing, and I just want you to note the trend. And the trend is these are all jaguar in Arizona, and this is going from 1827 through 2014. And as we move in time, notice what happens. That's the whole purpose of me showing this. So you can see they get down to just a very few sightings. There was one just sighted a few weeks ago in Arizona, and U.S. Border Control actually has it on their camera. They have a camera up high and took pictures of it, and it is believed to be a different jaguar than one that was recorded here just a few months ago. One that was recorded here about a year ago was recently confirmed dead by these folks, actually the Northern Jaguar Project in Mexico. It was killed in Mexico. They do have some protections in Mexico. Here it's absolutely illegal to kill them. But in Mexico, they're on preserves. It's illegal to kill them. If you catch one alpha preserve, it's not necessarily illegal, and that happens. So if we take a look at their feet, they also have the same pattern. Wider than long, no claws, tri-lobed, which is kind of hard to see. Jaguar feet to me look puffy. They look balloony compared to like lions. Like somebody made an animal balloon, a balloon animal out of it, and that's made the footprint. It's not as deeply lobed as mountain lions, so it's harder to see the tri-lobe back here. So mountain lions and jaguar do share territory. They generally avoid each other. Cats are smart. They know if they get into a fight, they might not be able to hunt tomorrow. If I can't hunt tomorrow, I die. So they generally avoid each other. Where they do coexist, jaguar tend to go after the larger prey. Most of the study comes from Central and South America. They don't have a set breeding season because they are, generally speaking, tropical animals. Tropical animals don't have as distinct breeding seasons often as animals that live far north or far south for obvious reasons. 1 to 4 cubs, typically born in the spring, generalization. And home range is much smaller than lions, typically 4 to 66 miles. There was one, there it is. You can tell I'm not wearing my glasses. I'm squinting myself down to 20/30 vision maybe. Was 525 miles, and that one was one in Arizona. Modern jaguar in Arizona are at the edge of the limit. There hasn't been a female in Arizona since '63, I believe, was the last female recorded in Arizona. So these are males that are wandering far looking for females. Arizona is marginal habitat. It's probably always been marginal habitat for jaguar, again, because they're really a tropical cat. So they are fearsome predators. I think I can click that. So that's a caiman, which is a small alligator. Notice what it's doing, and it will pause right here. It is puncturing the skull. Jaguar have the most powerful bite in the animal, among all cats. And they frequently kill or dispatch their prey by puncturing their skull. The only other cat that regularly does this, small cats like domestic cats will puncture the skulls of rodents, and leopards will puncture the skull of primates when they catch them. I just thought this was worth showing the stealth and the strength. Very, very sturdily built animal, not an animal to mess with. And swims away, and also notice not scared of the water. Notice it's not malice in its face, it's just hungry. All right, so moving on. Now we come to some of the distasteful photos here. Jaguars were, like almost all predators, were treated with disdain, persecuted throughout the entire Southwest history. Jaguars didn't become protected until 1969. And a bounty remained on their head until 70. After they were protected, there was still a bounty on them. Now they are protected by the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, and people that kill jaguar in the United States are prosecuted federally. And historic photos here, there was like 15 of these photos. I took out most of them, but I am going to show you a few of them. But these are where the records come from. the records that Randy Babb wrote that article about and Dave Brown wrote that article about. There's no doubting that's a Jaguar. By the way, one of the things I forgot to point out about Jaguar, I'm not going to go all the way back there, the rosettes. I guess I'll show you in this photo. The rosettes of Jaguar are complex. See how there's dots in there? These are called rosettes. Leopards don't have that. Leopards typically have the ring, but there's nothing inside of it. Just a quick and easy, rough and tough way when somebody shows you a photo and says this, because people do that kind of stuff, especially on like Facebook. You know, is this a leopard or is this a jaguar? You'll know if you see that. So the last legally killed jaguar was in '65. They were protected in '71 fully by the Endangered Species Act. That was in '71. And in '71, another one was killed. And then a decade and a half goes by and nobody saw any jaguar in the state of Arizona. Because again, marginal habitat, not a lot of them, and every time there is one, people kill it. They eat the same things we eat, or they can eat us, and humans tend to not like that. This was illegally killed in '86, this particular jaguar, and this was one of the first ones. It was the first one in Arizona that was prosecuted under the Endangered Species Act and state regulations. This person went away for killing that cat. This cat was photographed by houndsman Warner Glenn in '96. He has a book called Eyes of Fire. I'd been on Warner Glenn's property. I used to do paleontology. He used to allow us to dig on his property in southeastern Arizona. Houndsman means that he generally hunts mountain lions with dogs and guides people to hunt mountain lions with dogs. I don't particularly like this practice. It's legal. They don't hurt the jaguar. They let it go. But I don't like it because what can happen is you can run out this cat. Cats are not dogs. Dogs have very large hearts and lungs relative to their body size. They can run a very long time. Cats don't. Cats can run very quick, but not long. And if you send a bunch of hounds after this cat and chase it down, it might use up whatever energy reserve it has and not be able to hunt tomorrow. So I don't particularly like this kind of practice, but it is legal. And this was the first jaguar that was seen in '96 in more than 10 years. This one is a more recent photo of a jaguar, a male jaguar that was residing in Arizona for a period of time. A well-known jaguar by the name of Macho B. You may or may not be familiar with the story of Macho B. It's a tragic story, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. Most jaguar documented have been male. Again, female has not been seen in the state since '63. Here you can see the rosettes better, how they have dots in them. Each one unique, like fingerprints. And identifying an individual, we use camera traps for this purpose, and we do that to track movements, home range, population dynamics, things like that. So these three cats, these three photos were taken, and then you take a look at the rosettes. And what you see here, very unique rosette. That one doesn't have it. This one has the exact same pattern, like fingerprint. So this cat and this cat, same cat. Typical Arizona habitat for jaguar are these kind of riparian areas, canyons, for two main reasons, three main reasons. I could probably come up with more. But good cover, few people, good eats. And that's how they can make it into Arizona, is typically through this kind of habitat. So Macho B, this cat you can see with this enormous collar on it, they have gotten slightly smaller, but not a whole lot. Since 2009, and this is a photo of its release. The first time it was caught, second time it was caught. So Macho B was kind of a unfortunate incident. We hired Game and Fish, hired an outside contractor, tracker, and he didn't have the best ethics. And basically what happened is they trapped this cat. This cat was already 16 years old. He was already sick at that time. And he spent the night in a trap, a leg hold trap, not like one of those claw ones, a snare. And basically ran himself out. And he had to be put down because of that. It wouldn't have been fair to do anything else at that point. Now, lifespan of a jaguar, about 15 years. So he was in his last years of life. Doesn't excuse it. The Game and Fish person that worked with that trapper, who, by the way, is promptly moved out of the country and is now living somewhere in South America, But the game and fish person was relieved of duty after this event because they hired that trapper. So it's an unfortunate incident. But the goals, again, remote camera traps to find out habitat preferences and home range and whether they're migrants or residents in the state of Arizona. So last big cat we're going to talk about is ocelot, Leopardus pardalis. Beautiful cat. Note the pattern, this chain-like pattern. I'll bring that up, but this is a better photo, so I wanted to point that out. Most rare cat in Arizona, easily distinguished, although one was just photographed less than 2 months ago in the Huachucas. Excuse me. Distinguished by their small size, that chain-like pattern, long tail, these ornate facial markings that they have, and very mild temperament. This doesn't mean try to pet it. But they are very mild-tempered. They are pretty chill cats. They purr just like house cats do. When you scritch them, no, I'm kidding, don't do that. So recent immigrants to Arizona, and by that I mean a few hundred years, is the thought on this, that they have not, there is no fossil record of ocelot in Arizona, and that they are believed to be expanding their range northward. Now, a history, and I'm not going to go through each incident here, but first record was in 1887. Then you can see a trapper caught this one, a government trapper collected, that means killed. Houndsman killed an ocelot in 64. Tucson man hit one with an automobile. And so, again, this is kind of sad data, but it's data. It's actual data. I can't tell you the number of times that people send in photos of bobcats, for example, and they're convinced it's mountain lions. Of course, a mountain lion's bigger and stronger and tougher and scarier, so they want it to be a mountain lion. But I'm like, notice the short tail, notice the size, notice the spots. People are convinced. But again, one was just recently photographed in southeastern Arizona. There's a Facebook page, if you're on Facebook, called Trail Cam Journeys. I strongly recommend joining. It's really cool. And one of the head guys, the guys that started it, I think his name is Jason Miller, has some really good footage. He doesn't disclose location, other than like Huachucas. So distribution in Arizona, going back a long time, they're all the way up in the Verde Valley. More recently, all southeastern Arizona. So historic range, modern range. Nocturnal and secretive, they're shy cats, very shy. Spend the day in trees, they're very good at being arboreal. They rest during the day, hunt at night. They're usually solitary except for mating season. They don't form, prides or anything like that. Give birth to 2 kittens. Prey, again, anything it can catch, mostly rodents, hares, hare, and birds. They're really good at catching birds. Prey is captured on the ground and in the trees. This is an article from, I can't read that. I don't have my glasses on. I don't know if I can read it anyway. What is it? January 6th, that I got, but I have no idea what that is. What? I'm glad I'm not the only one. It was just an article about finding an ocelot in Arizona. This is Mary Jo Rory posing with a mounted ocelot, so that's not a live ocelot. Killed by a trapper in the Dragoon Mountains in 27. I guess I understand why that photo is cool. You can still see that ocelot, by the way, that stuffed one. It is on example there at Banwar, Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge, south central Arizona, right on the border. Great place to see ocelot or jaguar, if you're going to see them. But that particular one is still on display. That one was photographed in 2009. Here's a sad photo of one that was killed outside of Globe, Arizona, in 2010, hit by a car. First one reported in 30 years in the state. Every wildlife biologist knows this one. If you say ocelot 2010, they're like, oh, the one by Globe? Everyone knows this because it was a record-breaking case. This one was one that was photographed in the Huachucas in 2011. And what's believed to be a different one, same time frame from the Santa Ritas. Ocelot from 2011, I don't have any information on it. 2013, this one's also from the Santa Ritas in 2013, camera track. The last thing I'm going to talk about is Jaguar undy. We don't have them. They don't live here. So it's highly improbable that they live here, and I'll tell you why. So this is a cat, usually several times a year, somebody will send in a picture saying, I got a Jaguar undy. I fully encourage you, if you have a picture you think is a Jaguar undy, please send it to me. I'd love it if we had a Jaguar undy here. They're really cool cats. We don't have them here. It's always a black house cat. Right, always a feral cat, or stray, or whatever. They are really cool cats, but they're tropical cats. Look at the foliage here. This is a tropical cat. Not only is there no recorded evidence in the state of Arizona of Jaguar undy, there's no recorded evidence in the state of Sonora, Mexico. So somehow they skip over the whole state of Sonora, make it into Arizona, and people are convinced that they see Jaguar undy, and I understand it's a cool cat, but they have very different. Notice the head has kind of got this real sloping head. They're very long and lanky. They have very long tails. Their gait, their walk is different than a modern cat, than a house cat, excuse me. They don't live here. It's improbable that they ever lived here. Not impossible, but improbable. Again, if you get a photo you think it's a Jaguar undy, please send it to me. I would be happy to put your picture up on the wall and use it in this presentation. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to ask what questions you have. That's my email address. That's Cheyenne's email address. Even though she hasn't said anything tonight, she's sitting over there if you want to bother her. And you can take your phone and take a picture of it, or you can grab a card of mine. So what questions can I answer? Thank you. Correct.
And they did it based upon the population. It was like 10%. So they thought there were 3,000, like you said. So they counted, once you got to the 10%, then they cut off the hunting. So if they really don't have an accurate account, that's a little scary that they're still allowing people to hunt what they think is 10% of an inaccurate number.
So basically the question is if we don't have a complete census of the lion population, how do we allow hunting, or how do we determine the number? And it's done through partial census. So we do have partial census data. So we know habitat that lions live, and what we do is get population numbers in areas that are known to have lions, but it's not a comprehensive census. And that's what the data that I'm using when I say about 2,000 was estimated from the last comprehensive one. So Game and Fish, or anyone else, Fish and Wildlife Service, don't have the resources to do a comprehensive study every year. So what they do is they base it upon previous data and current partial census data, and then kind of make an educated estimate as to what the population is in the state and base the tags on that. If the number is perceived to go down, the total population number is perceived to go down, or tags are filled too easily, or not filled at all, or filled at whatever percentage, then adjustments are made. Every year, the people looking at those numbers are trained wildlife biologists, though. It's not like somebody's just randomly picking a number out of a hat. And a lot of people do not like this animal, but they like this animal, whatever those are. And therefore, they always get sensitive when this animal is harvested, and they don't get sensitive when this animal is harvested, because that animal's gross, whatever it is. And lions are one that really get people passionate. And that's the reason we do what we do, is an educated populace tends to be a passionate populace. So I want people to be educated about animals so they want to protect them. That's why we're the softer, kinder, gentler side of an agency that regulates hunting in the state. But believe me, those numbers are carefully scrutinized every year, but the comprehensive census is something that usually happens every decade or two because of the expense involved and the human hours, the work hours involved. It's a good question, thank you.
You can buy a lion tag out of the common.
Yes. You can. Say what? Well, they know how many they sell, tags, and I believe, so you can buy some lion tags over the counter, some are drawn, right? They're all over the counter. For lions? So what they do is they monitor the unit that the tag is sold for, right? So the state is divided into all the hunting units, hunt units. It's mandatory. It's mandatory that you report a lion. So if you tag a lion, in other words, if you harvest a lion, it's mandatory that that lion is reported and potentially even brought in to be recorded to a game and fish office. I know I've seen it at headquarters. They do pull. So what Cheyenne said is that they pull a tooth, and they have a specific tooth that they pull. It's probably a premolar, if I had to guess. I don't know because I don't hunt lions. But they pull a tooth, and they check that for genetic diversity. They check that for disease and age. So they know what age the lion was when it was harvested. Yes, sir.
Can you state why those 4 lions were killed by game fish here?
So I don't know the details. So the question was why the 4 lions in Prescott area, just in May, I think, right? Were killed. And the fact of the matter is game and fish is always going to prioritize human lives. Always. So they felt, for whatever reason, and I don't know the specifics for that case, they felt for whatever reason that these lions were a danger to humans, and humans are always going to win out in that case. And I can tell you, I have never had the misfortune of having to inform a family that they've lost a loved one due to a lion, a bear, or whatever. But my predecessor did. And he had been with the department for 32 years, and he remembers that as the single worst day of his life, that particular day, of having to tell somebody, and this was a woman that was killed by a black bear. And he was with the group that went to the family's house. And so we being Game and Fish, is always going to prioritize human life. There are some things that are currently changing. So one is the thoughts behind, like, if an animal eats human flesh. Remember in Tucson, there was a case where there were 3 lions. It was a mom lion, and a mother lion, and 2 kittens or cubs, young, that were with her, and they were feeding on a human. They didn't kill the human, but they were feeding on a human. And this was in, it was just 2-3 years ago. What's the, Catalina State Park. And I just couldn't think of the name. And those lions were killed. And they weren't killed necessarily because they posed a threat other than they had tasted human flesh. There's very little scientific evidence that suggests that because an animal has tasted a human, that it's like, ooh, that's good. And it develops a taste for human. What's more likely the case is if an animal goes after a human, it's probably because we're slow and weak, relative. I mean, even compared to a mule deer, right? Don't want to tangle with a mule deer. That thing will mess you up. And they're much stronger than us, and we're slower than them, and we're weaker than them. And so when a predator gets to its advanced years, it's trying to feed its cubs in this case, and it found easy pickings. In this case, it was a human. And I'm not trying to be callous to that person. That person wasn't killed by the cats, but because it was eating human flesh, they felt that those animals needed to be dispatched. But again, the scientific evidence for that back thought of, if they have a taste for it, the science for that is marginal at best. Yes?
I have one of those horns, that make a real, does that scare a cat away or a bear away?
Yes, loud noises are always good. Again, you don't want to sound screechy, right? But I carry on my pack, actually, I think I took it off this. Yeah. So I have it on the pack that I actually hike with. That's kind of my work pack. It is. And even a whistle is a good idea. And a whistle, I'm making a mess of your place. So even a whistle is high pitched, but it doesn't have the same tone, right? So I prefer like a Fox 40 whistle. I don't get a kickback from Fox 40 or whoever makes them. I just like them because they can't be overblown. So old-fashioned whistles that have the little pith ball in them, you can overblow them. You blow them really hard and they just. A Fox 40 whistle is really made for coaches, like sports coaches, and you can't overblow them. The reason why that's good is because if you are really scared and really nervous and you blow really hard because you're anxious, you can overblow a regular whistle. So I like Fox 40s because they basically just get louder. But I don't recommend, like a long sustained tone. It's kind of like, multiple pop, 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 bah. Change it up. Because those are things, it's just like in brown bear country, which we don't have anymore in Arizona. The last one was killed, I think, in 1923. But in grizzly country, brown bears, people will tend to walk with bells on their packs, or if they're backpacking, they'll take a couple of their pots and strap them on the back of the pot, so every time they walk, it's like clang, 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 clang. It's not a natural sound. The bear hears that, and it's like, I don't know what that is. It's not pleasant. Bye. And takes off. So same principle would apply to cats or black bear.